USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to Weekend Review for Monday, November 18th, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Well, Jim, our game of the week had Cornell traveling to Clarkson. It didn't disappoint, at least if you're a big Red fan, as they swept the weekend with that win on Friday over Clarkson and then on Saturday against St. Lawrence.
I mean, Cornell is playing well. There's nothing more you can say about it. This is a great start to the season, 6-0. I mean, in my opinion, I'm one that when I make my votes for in the USCHO poll, if a team is number one in the country and they don't play, I tend to not bump them out. And that was the case for Minnesota State this week. But you can make a really strong case that Cornell, should get and will get a bunch of votes for first place. I don't think it'll be enough to overtake Minnesota State, but this is a pretty strong number 2 team in the country right now.
It's interesting you mentioned that. A lot depends if a team has a week off at how emphatic the voters were for them the week before, whether it was tenuous or not. And yeah, I'm with you. I think Cornell, when they were getting votes earlier on before they started playing because of their short Ivy League schedule, which Mike Schaefer has said that he'd like to do away with, by the way, I was sort of like, okay, well, let's wait, let's see. But at 6-0, and with some terrific goaltending, Matt Galida, I think this Cornell team could make some noise for a Frozen Four berth this season. And certainly if they get some first place votes, they're deserving of it, at least in this early part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, last year you got to think they were only a game away from the Frozen Four, and they kind of got stunned a little bit by Providence in the regional final. They just didn't seem to have it. And, don't forget that the day before they beat arguably one of the favorites. I think a lot of people believe that Northeastern could, walk into that tournament and win it. And they had just absolutely rolled over the Huskies last year in the opening game of the NCAA tournament. So to think that this is a potential Frozen Four team, absolutely. I mean, they're playing really well. They'll have some big tests. Obviously, I think, when they get down the road and play Harvard, that's, not only usually a pretty good rivalry game, but it'll be a game that'll have a lot on the line. And then there's just there's a lot of landmines that can be in the ECAC. I think that Quinnipiac's always kind of a difficult place to go and play. Yale seems to be able to get up for certain opponents. Princeton, Brown, and some of these schools. Dartmouth. I love the way Dartmouth is playing the ECAC right now. So, yeah, you just they're going to have to navigate some landmines within their own league. But this is a very good Cornell team.
And we talked to Casey Jones last week ahead of that game, head coach at Clarkson, and one of the phrases he used was that the ECAC is definitely top heavy with a lot of very good teams that all can challenge for the league title.
I think he's right about that. I think that you feel like at times that there are teams that can start to pull away, and Cornell, they're so hot out of the gate here that they feel like they're in one of those positions. You never know, could they be 4 games up by Christmas time. It's potential. But that's not been historically how things go in the ECAC, and you end up with a really tight battle that comes down to the final 2 weekends. So I don't know exactly what to expect, but I agree with Jones's assessment that there are a lot of teams that are very good in this league. At the end, I think, you'll probably still only be able to see 1 or 2 of them standing in the NCAA tournament, but there's a lot of quality programs in the ECAC right now.
And the ECAC's unique travel schedule with partners, and you only play one team. You only play a team once on the weekend is a big part of that too, I think. And you mentioned off to a good start, 6-0 Cornell, but 6-0 Harvard, sweeping Brown and Yale, and the Crimson are off to a good start as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the next storyline in the ECAC is, it's not just Cornell. Harvard's right there. I'm not sure that people are as high on Harvard just yet. I think that they're going to have to prove themselves a little bit more than Cornell. They didn't come in with the high expectations that Cornell had. So I think Harvard is right there, but I need to see a little bit more of Harvard to make sure that they are as good as we think they are. That's kind of one of those expectations type of statements that's probably a little too blanket and people won't like it. But I do think that Harvard is very good, but I want to see a little bit more of them before I start putting all of my chips in the pot on them.
Couple of good series over the weekend in the Big Ten, and one of them was Notre Dame at Wisconsin. And I want to start with the Badgers first. A 3-0 win on Friday night, the first blemish on the schedule for Notre Dame, and then a 5-4 overtime loss on Saturday. A young team may be looking for some consistency, but as this team develops and goes on through the season, I can only see the Badgers getting better and better, and they're already very good.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue for them and whether they're going to be a team that, say, is somebody that's going to be making a run in the NCAA tournament could come back down to just how many bad efforts that they get, how many games that they just don't play well, that they put up losses that they shouldn't have put up. Those are going to be the kind of what defines this team more so than maybe their great wins. This is obviously a very good win there last Friday night. But this team probably gets more defined by the games that they don't win. And, should they have lost that game? And that'll be something that gets talked about a lot because they have the talent, and talent is a wonderful thing, and you can't teach talent most of the times, and you can't do it quickly. So when you bring in the players that have the talent, that allows you to be in a position to be very successful. But it's getting the talent to play consistently, to put in the effort year round from the start of the training camp all the way to the final game of the season to always be present. So that is what will interest me as to how Wisconsin can play as this year goes on. Do they have some bad losses in there? Or are they a team that, as they get closer to Christmas and then after Christmas, that suddenly starts really being consistent and get, showing that they can go on a 7-game, 8-game, 10-game unbeaten streak, winning streak, something like that. That could push this team forward, especially in the Big Ten where there's a lot of parity and there's going to be a lot of closeness in the standings. If they can suddenly start pulling off some Big Ten weekend sweeps back to back to back, they put themselves in very good position.
And then on Saturday, the 5-4 win by Notre Dame, the win in overtime, and Notre Dame actually had to come back from a 4-3 deficit to Wisconsin, which had itself come back. Almost 13,000 people there at Kohl Center and a whole ton of shots from both teams. That was indeed an exciting game there.
And Notre Dame has played in some really tight one-goal games, overtime games this season. We were, if you remember, we were talking with Casey Jones, I think it was last week, about this and how beneficial that can be for a team to come out on the right side of this. And I was talking at one point to Michael Souza, the head coach at UNH, and he was talking about how last year his team lost. I think it was more than 10 one-goal games, and there was a bunch of ties in there. And if you just start turning some of those around, if you're already on the good side of those, as Notre Dame has been most of the time, that's a big positive. You're realizing that you can get into a game that's tight. You have the guy on your bench that can score the game winner. You have the guy on your bench who can make the defensive play to maintain that 1-goal lead. You have the goalie that can save the big shot. That's usually what kind of defines a clutch team. And I think that what we've seen from Notre Dame, Friday's loss aside, wasn't probably the effort that Jeff Jackson wanted, but Friday's loss aside, this is a team that is setting itself up to become very good.
Overtime wins in consecutive weekends. It was the Friday previous with the overtime winner against Ohio State. So some good things there for the Fighting Irish. As long as we're talking Big Ten, why don't we jump to Penn State at Minnesota? A pretty dominant weekend for the Nittany Lions, and you got to think that Gophers fans, especially the fans, and probably not as much as the coaching staff, starting to get a little nervous. 4-6-2 overall, 1-3-2-2 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an issue. And I think a lot of people thought that Minnesota was going to be back, that they'd be a very strong team this year. And out of the gate, they're just not proving it. And you look at the 8-2 loss to Penn State, followed by a 6-3 loss the next night. I mean, that's not what any Minnesota fan at home would ever expect. You kind of just got spanked around by a team. Yes, we know that Penn State has a very potent offense, but this is a Penn State that also got shut out a couple of weekends ago. So you sit there and say, well, maybe it's just Penn State and we'll be back. But I think if you're Minnesota, it's time to hit a panic button. For Penn State, on the other hand, you had that 2-0 loss to Michigan State back on November 8th. Now you're back. You beat them 6-4 the next night, 8-2 against Minnesota, 6-3 against Minnesota. The offense feels like it's going again. And if there was any concerns for Guy Gadowski and his team, that offense is cranking, and that's what you want to see. This is a team that scores a lot of goals. Listen, defense can be good. It doesn't always play out that way. But you look at it, they've only given up more than 3 goals 3 times this year. They've never given up more than 4. So if they can get into a shootout, I like them because they might give up 4 goals, but they're going to score 5 or they're going to score 7. Or I look at their record in games that they've given up 4 goals. They're 2-1. Because they scored 6 one night, and they scored 5 another night. So I kind of really think that this Penn State team, they look like they're back on track. They're back in the winning column, and that helps.
We've got more of Weekend Review coming up. Next thing we'll talk about is North Dakota at Denver.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is Weekend Review from USCHO. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. North Dakota, big weekend. The Fighting Hawks picking up 5 of 6 points at Denver, and after missing out on the NCAA tournament a couple of years in a row, it looks like the Fighting Hawks are positioning themselves in a good place already for the postseason.
Yeah, wow. You just got to love the way that North Dakota's playing, and it's not a season without blemishes, but they've also played a very tough schedule to date. Going on the road and kind of handling Denver the way that they did, that's nothing short of a very big positive for them. And knowing that they know how to win games. Again, you're talking about a really close game that goes into that 3-on-3 overtime. On Friday night, they come out with a win there. But then to come back and, beat Denver 4-1 on the road. This is a Denver team that was unflappable just going back a couple of weeks ago. And now I'm kind of starting to, get a little concerned for Denver. They've had some really good opponents in Duluth and North Dakota. But for the most part, I love the way things are going for North Dakota. I'm starting to get a little bit of concern for Denver. Both of those teams, though, we get a lot of wait and see for them going forward.
Well, there was an interesting game in Atlantic hockey over the weekend. Actually, an interesting pair of games. Friday night, you could not draw it up worse for Mercyhurst. They were blown out 12-0 at home by AIC. It was 5-0 at the end of 1, 9-0 at the end of 2, 12-0 final, being outshot 47-18. That's one of those things, sometimes the wheels will fall off on a team. I think this was on all 4 rims by the end of the game for Mercyhurst.
It certainly was. I talked to Rick Gotkin via text message yesterday, and he said that Friday night was the most frustrating night he's ever had as a coach. He, kind of joking, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he was. But he said, he had used his timeout when it was 4-0 really quick in the first period. His team was behind. And as things got worse, he didn't even have a solution on how to stop the bleeding. And he said I went over to the ref and asked him if I could use AIC's timeout because they weren't going to need it. So, that's something that Rick Gotkin really would say. But, he said that he was just shaking his head after Friday night. They did make an unbelievable comeback, and that's really almost the story of it, and win the next night 4-3 in overtime against AIC. And I said, what did you change? He said, Jimmy, there was no magic formula. He said, we made a little bit of a tweak to the forecheck, but he's like, the guys played differently. And that is hockey. That it's not just college hockey. You see it at the NHL level all the time because the season's longer and guys just, some nights they fall behind and they're just done. There's no comeback in them. And that was the case in Mercyhurst on Friday. They were done and there was absolutely nothing left for them to try to fight for. And unfortunately they didn't show much fight. But then to come back the next night, you've cherished that opportunity to be able to play back-to-back nights, and when it's the same opponent, you really can cherish it. And they had a chance to find some revenge, find some salvation in the second game, and they did a 4-3 overtime win, and that's just a great statement for Mercyhurst.
Well, while we are mentioning Atlantic hockey, Robert Morris was picked 7th in the coaches poll, but they have already staked themselves a strong first place lead in conference, 7-1 in conference. They've played Bentley 4 times, swept them on the road this past weekend, swept them earlier in the season at home. They are off to a terrific start. A big part of that, they lost a goaltender. They lost Frank Marat to Clarkson on a graduate transfer and picked up Justin Kappelmaster. He has been stellar in net for the Colonials.
Yeah, I saw Derek Schooley on Thursday night, and he's very high on the way his team's playing right now. He understands every now and again you're going to have, some small, bumps in the road, and there's going to be nights that they're just stinker games, but you try to avoid those, and you find ways to win, and that they've done that right now. And this is a team that's clicking on kind of all cylinders, and it's keeping it going. And obviously, when you bring in a goaltender like Kappelmaster and how he's playing right now, it's fortunate to have that experience in net, a grad transfer to stabilize you when you really didn't have anybody. Once Marat left, there was nothing there. So. I think that this is going to be a pretty good team. This is going to be a more than competitive Robert Morris team, and they're going to prove a lot of people wrong. Anybody that picked them for 7th place didn't really understand what potential was for the talent in that locker room.
And in general, when you have somebody playing very well in goal, there's this domino effect out from there. You can adjust how you play the whole game. You can be a little bit more aggressive. You can be much more confident. It really... A great goaltender can change the entire psyche of your team.
It can, and the other way too. When you think you're playing pretty well as a team, and every time a puck goes on net, it's behind the goaltender. It destroys the psyche of the team. You feel like there's no hope. We have to limit this team to 8 shots, or we're going to lose. So when you have, it goes both ways. The goaltender really changes how a team. How their outlook is and what they feel and what their response is, how hard they play in front of you. It all comes down to the goaltender. And you hate to say that the position is that important, but it really is.
Couple of quick hits before we get into one other item. Michigan State took both ends of a home and home with Michigan. Things looking a little difficult for the Wolverines and a pretty good start to the season for the Spartans.
There's some concern there for Mel Pearson and his club, not coming out the way that I think people expected him to. But Danton Cole, give them some credit that they've now won 3 of 4, and they've swept their rival, and they go on the road and shut out Penn State in that span and play competitive both nights out of Penn State. So I love what's happening in Michigan State. I think Danton Cole's a great coach. I think he's the right person for that program. He seems to have him be playing well. Mel Pearson, I hope he's probably not panicking, but there's probably some stuff that needs to start to change to get that team back on the right track. We know that they have too much talent to not be winning some of these games that they're losing.
There's been a lot of turmoil up in Alaska, both for Alaska and for Alaska Anchorage about the future. Word is they'll be back next year in the WCHA. But Alaska is off to a good start. Now, they've played a couple more games than some of the other teams in the league, but they're tied for first place right now in the WCHA. They picked up a split at Northern Michigan, a team that probably will still be in the poll or close to it again this week. 5-3 in conference are the Nanooks.
Yeah, it's a positive sign, and you hope that these positives can help the people that don't watch or don't understand hockey but still make decisions about the purse strings of a university. You hope that success can open their eyes a little bit. And if you can see some positive, whether it's positive press coming out of it, whether it's just positive on-campus attitudes, student body, whatever it could be, that's a good thing. And if Fairbanks, which their program feels like it's probably a little bit in jeopardy when you really look at everything that's gone on, the potential to cut both of their programs, the potential to limit it to just one program, the lack of a home as it might be in the WCHA. Though I got a note from WCHA Commissioner Bill Robertson, last week after we talked on this show a little bit about it, and then I think we wrote about it in Tuesday Morning Quarterback, and where these teams, the two Alaskas and Alabama Huntsville, stand after next season. And his response was that there is still a desire to keep the WCHA. It might mean trying to move some other teams around and recruit teams from different leagues. Obviously, we know that Arizona State needs a home, but I'm thinking that maybe Atlantic hockey becomes maybe a target of the WCHA to fill some slots. But according to Bill Robertson, there is a strong desire to keep this league even once 7 of their 10 members leave.
Well, and you also have out there the question about St. Thomas and whether they would be accepted to the WCHA, and whether in January the NCAA is going to grant their request to skip over Division II and go directly to Division I. So that's a question out there. I came across an article from 7 years ago from our colleague Chris Lurch writing about Atlantic hockey and picking up teams to be the 12th team. 7 years ago, one of the teams mentioned in there is Alabama Huntsville. They're a possibility to go the other way if things don't keep going with the WCHA. But it could be very interesting. There may be some musical chairs going on at the coaches' meetings in Tampa come this April.
Yeah, I firmly believe that there will be a lot of discussion going forward as to where this potentially can go.
Well, the last thing I want to get to, Friday night, my Twitter feed was blowing up because of some comments made by a Toronto sports writer. And Jim, you live in the Boston area, so you know how pervasive and idiotic sports radio is in Boston. I think I'm fair in saying both of those. But even I could not disagree with the take from one of the people from WEEI in Boston. But here's the tweet that I saw when I got home on Friday night after the games. What an idiotic decision by Jerry York to pass on the day's festivities at the Hockey Hall of Fame so he could coach yet another U.S. college game. That's my view. You can disagree. And that is from Steve Simmons, a sports columnist for the Toronto Sun, and also a guy who shows up on sports radio up there. Well, if you are not familiar with social media, there's something in Twitter called being ratioed, and that is when you get a lot more comments than likes on your tweet. That means people are slamming you over what was said. And Steve Simmons now has his picture in the online dictionary next to the word ratioed because he was just slammed for those comments. Anybody who knows Jerry York, anybody knows why Jerry York is getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame tonight, knows what his dedication is to his team. And to say that he is disrespecting some glad-handing and backslapping and some things that are preliminary to that, and to say that Jerry York would abandon his team for some self-recognition, doesn't know Jerry York, doesn't know college hockey. And as we were talking before we got started, Jim, a lot of people in Canada just have no clue about the caliber and the quality and the importance of NCAA hockey in the U.S.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, Ed, is, at the end of the day, it's really just kind of a lack of respect. And people up in Canada are still, we can't put too many games on TV up there, obviously. This seems to be a lot more televised up in Canada now, U.S. college games, than ever, but we still don't have enough because they have no idea the quality of the play of college hockey. They have no respect for the college game. They think if you don't play major junior, you have no shot at the NHL. Yet it was literally 1/3 of the players in the NHL last year played college hockey. It's idiotic. The part on this journalist part, there's the idiot. If there's an idiot in that's the idiot. Jerry York did what Jerry York does, and Jerry York is a builder in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's not in there for being a player, although he was a great college player. He's in there because he has been behind the bench since age 26 as a head coach. He has won more games by far than any other coach. No coach will ever touch Jerry York's wins record. I guarantee you that. And at the same time, he's always made it about everybody except himself. You know, when I saw Jerry at Hockey East Media Day, I hadn't talked to him over the summer. I sent him a quick text message, I think, when he got into the Hockey Hall of Fame, but I hadn't had a chance to say congratulations. So I mentioned it when I saw him at Media Day. He wanted to talk nothing about it. He's extremely humble to be going in. And, you know, if you've read the stories about it, and there was one in the Globe Hockey Notes column, he didn't even answer the phone when they called to tell him he was getting in because he didn't recognize the phone number. Then they called twice. Then they called 3 times, and he still hadn't answered. And finally, one of his assistants said, "Just answer the phone, will you?" And it was John Davidson was on the line. He thought, now John Davidson, the GM of the New York Rangers, now he thought he was talking. He wanted to talk about a prospect or somebody he wanted to trade for. He wasn't even thinking about the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that's Jerry York, because he doesn't think about his honors and his legacy. He thinks about winning, and he thinks about his team and his players and his staff. He thinks about his fans, and that is why Jerry York is a Hall of Famer. So the fact that he skipped a ridiculously stupid Hockey Hall of Fame game. Who cares about the Bruins and the Maple Leafs? They play 19 times a season anyways. Who cares that they're playing on a Friday night and you're going to have the people in the Hockey Hall of Fame that are going in there to get stupid rings? He got everything a day later or whatever on Sunday. He doesn't need that. He needs to coach his team. He's, unlike these other people who are retired and haven't played the game in 15 years, whatever, some of them, he's there. He's actively doing this every day. He's not a retired player. And that's what people forget. The guy still takes a lot of pride in his job, and he would never bail on his team. So, this is a guy that, had major eye surgery twice in the same season a few years back, and still found a way to keep coaching. And despite the fact that his doctors told him, listen, if you don't spend 23 hours a day laying down, you could lose your eyesight. And that's Jerry York. He wanted to be there for his players. He did everything to make sure the games that he felt good enough he could be at. And I just can't understand how anybody could come up and build this opinion. It just shows that these people up in Toronto, they think the Hockey Hall of Fame is the be-all, end-all of the world. And it's not. And a great point to that, Jerry York, before he was inducted, I guess yesterday was the first day he was up there, never been to the Hockey Hall of Fame in his life.
So there you go.
So there you go. That is Jerry York in a nutshell. He's more about what happens on the ice at Boston College, in Watertown, Mass, whatever it is. He is as grassroots can be, and that's who Jerry York is. And the idiot in this is a bad Canadian journalist.
Well, and let me follow it up by saying there are 59 other head coaches in Division I. All of them, I'm sure, are standing behind Jerry York, certainly by what I'm seeing on social media. But I've got just 2 things for the Toronto sports press. One, you still got 2 or 3 more weeks to kvetch about Don Cherry. So, start writing some more of that stuff. I'm sure you haven't completely exhausted that topic. And one other thing for Toronto sports media, how about this? 1967. Worry about that. Okay?
I agree, Ed. I agree 100% with you.
All right. So it's always good when Jim and I agree, and that's most of the time. But, college hockey, we're both great fans and just love the sport, and I hope you could tell by that passion. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. We'll have the USCHO Spotlight podcast a little later on this week, and at the end of the week, the Game of the Week podcast previewing our marquee game and some of the other ones. You can find all of that at uscho.com/podcasts. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.